Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wild Washington Live Southern Resident Killer Whales. My name is Leah Althauser, and I use she, her pronouns. And I am so excited that you are joining us today. If you haven't already, please let us know in the Q&A where you're coming from and what you're interested in learning about Southern Resident Killer Whales. Now, before we begin, I have just a couple of quick housekeeping things. This is part of the Wild Washington Live educational program. Wild Washington Live is the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife's K through 12 education program, and it includes lessons, virtual events, field trip kits, and more. If you're interested in learning about any of these resources, I've dropped a couple of the links for you in the chat. We have enabled closed captioning. So if you would like to turn it off, please click the button with the 2 C's in the lower right-hand corner of your toolbar, and you'll see the option for turning off subtitles. We will not be taking verbal questions, so raised hands will not be called on, but if you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A. When you leave the Zoom room today, a window will appear asking you for feedback of this event. And if you have a couple of minutes, we just ask that you please answer some short questions because your feedback really helps to make Wild Washington a lot better of a program for you. We are recording this session and it will be on YouTube in a couple of days under our Wild Washington playlist. If you're interested in watching some of our other pre-recorded sessions, you can find that session here, or that information here. Oh, and I just got word, sorry, I was sending the other information to the wrong place. So that is for our Wild Washington program. And then finally, if you do have a question and it doesn't get answered, you can email me and I will make sure that your question gets answered, and I will drop that in the chat as well. All right, so I'm really excited to announce our presenter today. Dr. Julie Watson will be talking with us about Southern Resident Killer Whales and their recovery. Dr. Watson is just an amazing human, but she's also sort of occupies a really special area where she looks at how humans and killer whales intersect with one another. And so Dr. Watson, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm looking forward to hearing what we're gonna learn about.
Thanks, Leah. I'm glad to be here. And I will switch over to my presentation. Hopefully you can see that now. Is that good for you, Leah?
Yep, we can see it.
Wonderful. Okay. Howdy, everyone. My name is Julie. I'm going to be talking to you today about killer whales, and I'm very excited to be sharing some really cool science with you, as well as some policy stuff and some things we're doing in the state to try to help the Southern Resident Killer Whales. So we're going to learn all about them, and I can't wait to hear your questions. First, though, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and how I got into a job where I get to do something so cool as work with Southern Resident Killer Whales. So I'm originally from Pennsylvania. That's over on the other side of the country if you're tuning in from Washington State. And I went to college there. I really love to travel, and I love the idea of helping people and making a difference in the world. So I went to school for political science and psychology at Penn State University. And there I really got interested in what are the big picture issues that are going to be important in the next 100 years, and how can I make a difference on those? And what I learned was there was a potential for water to be a big source of conflict in the future, especially as climate changes and the population grows. And so I got really into conflict resolution around water, and then more broadly around natural resources. So I ended up working here in Washington in natural resources policy and focusing on things that we all care about, like Southern Resident Killer Whales. So these are big, tough issues to work on, but they're also really important. And because killer whales are important to us, working to help them also helps people. And so I'm always really excited to get to do that. And as Leah pointed out when she introduced me, my name is Dr. Watson because I got a PhD and my last name is Watson, and that is a really fun name to have. A little bit of other stuff about me. I love Halloween, and I love, there's a movie called Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind. When I was younger, I used to watch a show called The Planeteers and Captain Planet, and that was really fun. So you learn a lot about caring for the environment and wanting to help make a difference. And Nausicaa is a really cool princess that saves the world. So I also have a cat named Professor Moriarty and another cat named Bowie Von Fluff Monster. I love going to national parks and I love to sing. So those are a few things about me. I also have a habit of taking pictures of my feet in different bodies of water around the world. Like I said, I like water. And so these are some places, different big bodies of water all around the world. And I put in a picture there too. I took of a monkey eating an ear of corn in front of a temple because he looked really funny. So anyways, let's talk about killer whales because they're really cool. Killer whales are these big things that live in the water, and they're actually more like dolphins than whales, but they're black and white. They have this really distinctive marking. We call them killer whales. You can also call them orca. That means the same thing. They get up to 32 feet long and they can weigh up to 11 pounds. They have really long pregnancies, longer than people, and they live a really long time. They can live up to 90 years. So they're kind of like people in that way. They have long lives, they grow up slowly, and they're out there living in the water and doing their thing, and they live all around us here in Puget Sound in Washington State. So orcas, you can see they have this thing called a dorsal fin that sticks up above the water. And the males typically have bigger, taller dorsal fins. And that's how you can kind of tell the difference between a male and a female. Something you should know though is that there are orcas all over the world and there's all different kinds. And we have 3 different kinds. They're called ecotypes that live here in Washington. So there's one, the resident killer whale. And then there's a Biggs killer whale. We also call those transient killer whales. And there's an offshore killer whale that also lives in Washington, but we don't see those very often because they live really far out in the ocean. But I'm going to talk a little bit about all 3 types, and then we're really going to spend most of our time talking about southern resident killer whales. So like I said, they live really long lives. They're kids through when they're 10 years old, and then they get to be teenagers and they act like teenagers for a little while. And then as they become adults, maybe they start a family, but even the grandparents and especially the grandmothers are really important in helping take care of the families. Here are those 3 types. You can see they're all the same. They're all black and white. They've got this fin that sticks up, but the fins look really different. You can see there's some circles there. So the fins of the southern residents are a little bit more hooked in the shape. You can see it kind of like bends a bit. Whereas the transient killer whales, this is the other type you might see here, they have a pointy fin. And then the offshores is a little bit in between. They're a little smaller fin, not quite as hooked as the southern residents. So these are the 3 types. The other difference, you can see that other set of circles down at the bottom, those are called the saddle patches. And there are different patterns in the saddle patches. And that helps you tell not only which type of killer whale you're looking at, but also it can help you identify which specific whale. They're kind of like fingerprints. So you can see, and if you can get a good look at which type of shape it has there and how it looks, that might actually help you tell which whale you're looking at. So southern resident killer whales, the ones that live here, they're the most endangered ones, but our state thinks of all killer whales as endangered. And the transients, certain populations of the transients are having a hard time as well. But for the most part, we focus on southern residents because they're the ones that need our help the most right now. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit more about offshore killer whales. These are super mysterious, and we actually didn't know very much about them until pretty recently. Like I said, they live really far out in the ocean and in the deep, and they are really special in that they eat sharks. So something has to be pretty strong and pretty a good hunter to be able to hunt and eat sharks as the main part of its diet. And you can see here, there's a picture of its teeth that are all worn down because it has to crunch through some really tough other animals out in the ocean. Now, the southern residents and the bigs, you can see, so bigs are transient killer whales. The big difference here, besides that they look a little bit different, they maybe travel a little different, they eat different things. So we've got a couple on the left side here. You can see that you've got the different kind of dorsal fin. There's a male and a female, and those are the southern residents, whereas the bigs, transient killer whales, have the pointier fins. The southern resident orcas over here, it says social structure. They live in these matriarchal societies and they stay together in their family groups their whole life. And we talk about them in terms of pods. The transient killer whales, they're much more likely to break off and move around, and they're not as strict in their social structure. And the other big way you can tell them apart is that the southern residents, they eat salmon. They love fish. Chinook salmon are their absolute favorite, whereas the transient orcas, the bigs orcas, they will eat marine mammals. So you oftentimes around here will see them eating seals or sea lions. So here's a picture of that. This is a transient orca and it's caught a harbor seal. So they're pretty good hunters. They work together and they'll corner something and you can see them going after it, and it's really interesting. They're in small groups. So if you see just a couple orcas when you're out with your family on a beach or something and you see orcas out there, if there's just a couple, it's probably the transient killer whales. And if they're eating a seal, you know it's a transient killer whales because the southern residents won't eat seals. Southern residents, on the other hand, these are the endangered ones. They prefer Chinook salmon. The calves sometimes look a little yellow, and we'll see a picture of that in the next slide. So here we go. There's a southern resident orca eating a salmon up on the top here, and then there's a baby, and you can see it looks a little yellow while it's a baby, and typically that goes away. So like I said, they stay with their families. The grandmas play a really important role. We talk about them in terms of matrilines. And the pods can be up to 60 whales in a single group, and they'll travel in a group together. They sometimes break off and do different things, but very often you'll see them traveling with their family. And they live on the coast and in Puget Sound. So they will extend from British Columbia down the whole way to California out on the coast, and then they really like to come into Puget Sound where they can find their salmon, and sometimes they'll come here in the fall and the winter to eat different kinds of salmon called chum, but they're around, and in the past we've seen them a lot more, and in the last couple of years we think they spend a little bit more time out on the coast, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that might be. But these are our hometown orcas. So we care a lot about these guys, and we care a lot about why they're having a hard time. Let's talk a little bit more about their social structure. So like I said, they have matrilines, which means the mom and the line through the grandma and the mom can create a little family group. So we look at them and we have different pods of orcas. That's this middle one. So we have J pod, K pod, and L pod. That makes up the clan, or the southern resident orca population. The pod, J pod, consists of several of these matrilines. So they're named, they all have a number. Each southern resident orca, we've given a name and a number, and you can name the matriline based on the grandma. So the grandma of that family, in this case, is J17, and her kids and their kids all are part of the same matrilineal family group. Let's talk about what's going on with the southern resident killer whales. So the historic population was estimated to be around 200 in the late 1800s. And then you can see we didn't really know how many there were, but around the 1970s, we started counting. And now we know exactly how many there are. There's a census, which is when they count the population. That's done every year. So they make sure they know how many we have. We keep track if they die, if new babies are born. We follow all of that. So when we started tracking, the population had dipped really, really low. And you can see there's this red arrow here, and it says end of captures for aquaria. So what happened in the 1960s and 70s is that a lot of these southern resident orcas were rounded up. and like boxed in by boats and then captured and taken away to be in aquariums and put on display. So if you've heard of a place called SeaWorld, that's a place that people in the past would go to see orcas. And there's still one southern resident orca alive in captivity in Miami. She's been there for a very long time. She would have been very young at the end of the capture area. So thankfully we stopped doing that and the population started to recover a little bit, but then it struggled. And you can see it was some dips and then it started to grow a bit and then it started to really dip again. And that's when it became a listed population. So the federal folks listed it right after the state. The state recognized something was going wrong and said, hey, this is an endangered species. And then soon after, around 2005, the federal agency did the same. So that gives them extra protections and it gives us a good reason to work on trying to figure out what's going wrong and trying to help them. But you can see we haven't solved the problem yet. The population has continued to kind of rise a little bit and then fall, and then it seems to be on a bad trajectory down near almost as low as we were at the end of the capture era. So every time a baby is born, we're really excited. And every time we hear of a death in the southern resident orca population, we're sad, and it reminds us how important it is that we continue this work of trying to help give them their best chance at survival. So there's some goals, and we want to see about a whale a year increasing the population size. And we're always studying and trying to learn more about why some calves survive and others don't, and why some pregnancies don't work out and why other ones do. And we're aiming for this. We're aiming for a positive growth. So if I go back to that last slide, instead of this downward trend, we want to see an upward trend to get back towards those historic or the higher numbers, maybe even up towards 200 if we were really lucky. But that'll take a lot of work. And what's going wrong? It's because they don't have enough of their primary food. They're really struggling to find enough Chinook salmon, and they need big, juicy salmon that they can catch and that they can feed their babies so that they can survive. And there are less salmon now than there used to be. And then they have a harder time catching those salmon as well, because we'll talk more about it a little later, but they have a hard time hunting when there are vessels around. They also have a lot more chemicals and other contaminants in their water and in their food that they eat, which means if they can't get enough food, they start to lose weight and get skinnier, which is not what you want for a whale. You want your whales to stay nice and big and plump. But when they lose weight, the toxic chemicals in their system will move around in their system and make them sick. So the chemicals and the pollution in the water is a really big issue. There's also the potential for oil spills. As we have more people in our region and as we have more boats coming in, there's more of a chance that oil will be spilled, and that could cause some major problems for southern residents. So human population growth and climate change are another really big set of factors that in the big picture, long term, affect how well we can recover the species or the population. All right, so let's talk more about each of these. So prey availability. So they like to eat Chinook salmon. They need more salmon to eat. We're trying to do some stuff to help them with that. So part of what we do at Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife is we have hatcheries, and hopefully you'll get a chance to visit a hatchery someday because they're really interesting. And there we help breed lots of little baby salmons and release them into the world so that there's more fish out there. And so this is somebody at our agency working in a hatchery to try to do that. And we've started to put out a lot more fish, trying to make a lot more baby fish and put them out into the world, hoping that some of those little baby fish will grow up and they'll be coming back to Puget Sound because salmon like to come back to Puget Sound, and that a southern resident orca will catch it and eat it on its way. Even though that's sad for the salmon, we need that to happen for the whale. We also need to make sure that the salmon doesn't get eaten by everything else out there before the whale can catch it. So part of the things the things that we work on are reducing or trying to stop or block other critters from being able to eat the salmon before the whales get the chance to. So everybody likes to eat salmon. The whales like to eat salmon, people like to eat salmon. There are some other big fish that like to eat salmon. Seals and sea lions like to eat salmon too. Birds like to eat salmon. So some of what we're trying to do is think about how can we stop a little bit of that predation so that more of those salmon can survive and become adults and hopefully also be shared with the southern resident killer whales. It's interesting because we have Thanksgiving this week, and a lot of that is about sharing food with others. And we need all the other critters in the water to share their food with the southern residents, and we need to share ours too. So one of the things that we do is we look at the people who catch fish and we talk with them and we think about, okay, if there aren't enough fish for all of us, how do we make sure we share so that the southern resident orcas can find some fish too? A big thing though is that the salmon need good habitat in order to survive. So they need healthy streams and healthy shorelines. The little baby salmon like to hang out in places called estuaries. That's at the mouth of a river where it flows into Puget Sound or the ocean. And they like to hang out there and like eat and get big. And then they go out into the ocean and then they come back several years later as adults. And they like to hang out and eat little fish along the beaches as well. So we need to have healthy beaches and healthy streams so that the salmon can get big and strong before they go out into the ocean and so that they can survive and come back and make more salmon. So some of the things that we work on are making sure that when we have roads that go over streams, that there's enough room for the salmon to swim through underneath. And so this is called a culvert down here in the bottom right corner. And we're trying to make sure that those are not little tiny pipes that a salmon can't get through, but they're big and open and have plenty of room for the stream to flow through. We also look at shorelines. So you can see this top picture of a beach. This is called armor, shoreline armor, or a bulkhead. And people put these in because they don't want the cliff to erode and to potentially affect their property, or they like the way it looks. But the beaches need that erosion so that the little baby fish can survive in there and get all the nutrients that they need. So some of the things we do is try to make those beaches back into more natural looking beaches. And we work with people who live on the shore to help them to do those projects to make their beaches healthier for fish and for orcas. Okay, so we talked a little bit about salmon. Let's talk a little bit about vessel noise and disturbance. So vessels, by vessels, I mean boats. And this can be boats with motors. We'll talk mostly about that, but it can also be boats like kayaks that are just out on the water near orcas. And there's a couple different things that are impacts. One is just the presence. You know, if you're trying to run across the room and there's a whole bunch of desks in the way, you might have a harder time and it'll take you longer to get there, and maybe you won't get there as fast as you want. So just having a bunch of boats around can be hard for the whales in that manner, but it can also be hard because boats make a lot of noise underwater. The ones with motors can be really, really loud. And that matters because the southern resident orcas, I know this is a little bit of a creepy diagram, but they use echolocation to find their food. So that red arrow on the top, they send out a sound and the sound bounces off of the fish and comes back to the whale, and they can understand that and they use that to know where the fish is and they follow it and they hunt it. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to show you a video that talks a little bit more about noise, and we'll hear some clips about what noise sounds like underwater.
You know, noise is a funny thing. We don't see noise. We don't even hear the noise unless you have a hydrophone in there.
Sound propagates incredibly well underwater. It travels faster than it does in air by a factor of 5, and it is really only spreads out. It doesn't dissipate.
We can estimate the size of the whale's world under quiet conditions and noisy conditions. What we're finding is that even the presence of boats can cause whales that were foraging to stop what they were doing and to travel.
Looking at noise, contaminants, and food availability and showing the relationship with that and what was actually possible, that was a pivotal point in my thinking to really see how important noise and disturbance was.
I wanted to play you this thing that we recorded that is so unusual. This is a sonar from a Canadian naval vessel. This is a pile driver. Now, how would you like to go fishing and hunting while that's going on? The most challenging acoustic task the whales probably have is to hear their own echolocation clicks coming back. And the whale has to hear that weakening sound at a considerable distance. If it's noisy, it's harder for them to do it. Now we have airplanes and noisy ships. We'll see if this system wants to work at all. That's what it sounds like underwater right now. Now that's very noisy, but that thing's only going to be very noisy for 4 minutes, whereas the big ship puts out energy in the frequency range of the orcas, and that makes it harder for them to communicate for a long period of time.
All right, hopefully you can hear that okay. I'm going to play another sound clip here. So here we're going to listen to some different noises that orcas make. So the important thing, since we were just talking about how they use echolocation, this is what it sounds like when they're clicking and they're sending out those sounds to try to figure out where the fish are. And then they also communicate with calls and whistles, and they can communicate over really long distances to coordinate and to see where everybody's at in their group and stay in touch. But they can't do that when they can't hear. But this is what it sounds like when they're calling to each other. And then here's what it sounds like when they whistle. So those are some interesting noises, right? So they're trying to make those noises, they're trying to talk to each other, and they're trying to find their food. And sometimes what happens is that they are using echolocation, they're using those clicks, and they're trying to hear if the sound's bouncing back to them. And if a boat comes nearby, one of the things we've seen is that they might just give up on trying to find food. They might say, you know what, it's too loud, and they'll switch behavior from hunting to just traveling. And that's a big deal when they're already having a hard time finding enough food. If they can't get to catch the food that's there because it's too loud and because it's not worth it to keep trying to find it when they can't hear. So a big thing we try to do is reduce sources of noise, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But first, you can listen for whales too. There's a website you can go to called Orca Sound, and you can go and you can listen in real time live. So you could try it out after this call even. You could go listen and see if you can hear any of those types of noises that we just listened to, or if you hear any boats going by and what that sounds like. So a hydrophone is this underwater microphone that's listening to all those sounds. And that's how we heard those really loud squeaky noises on the video, was a hydrophone. So you can listen into the hydrophones and you can hear what's going on in the orca's habitat too. So we're trying to reduce the amount of noise and the amount of boats that are around the southern resident orcas so they can spend more time finding their food. Perhaps we have increased the distance that boats can come close to orcas, and we try to encourage people to spend more time viewing them from shore, or maybe just staying really far back and letting them have some peace and quiet. We also have an area on the west side of San Juan Island. So if you know the San Juan Islands in northern Puget Sound, there's an area that the southern residents like to swim back and forth on in this red area, and they would look for food there. And we try to tell boats to please stay out of that area so that they can use that area to find their food. There's also a whale warning flag, and it's really cool. You can see a picture of that in the top right. And if you see that and you're ever out on a boat and you see somebody's flying that flag, you know that whales are nearby. And when boats slow down and stay a little further back, their boat noise goes way down, and that can help the southern residents hear better. People can also report when they see southern residents into an app called Whale Report. And that app, this bottom image, shows that they'll send the information to the ferries. Ferries can be really loud underwater. They'll send the information to the ferries and those large container ships to help them slow down or avoid coming too close to the whales. And that gives them more of a chance to keep doing what they're doing. And we don't want them to collide either. We definitely don't want to be hitting whales with boats. So the more that we can help get the information to those big boats that might not otherwise notice whales nearby, the better we can avoid those potential impacts. So let's talk about contaminants a bit. I mentioned this earlier, how water that's polluted and food, the salmon that are polluted, can make the whales sick. How does that pollution get into their system? And it's a lot of different ways. So all of our, we call them impervious surfaces. So all of the cement and the roofs and the buildings and the roads allow for chemicals to kind of sit there and build up. And then when it rains, that can wash that into our water sources. So we call that stormwater. And stormwater can have all kinds of stuff, including if you use chemicals in your yard to kill bugs or to kill weeds, or if there's dog poop even, that's a fun one. If there's dog poop that's left out, all of that can wash into the water, and that can make the salmon sick, and it can make the orcas sick. So some of the things that we do in the state are we try to look for those sources of pollution and reduce them. And people can help with that too. And part of that is thinking through the chemicals that we use and how we could reduce the ones that could end up in the waterways, and to make sure we use them, if we have to, safely and dispose of them properly. Now, population growth and climate change, like I said, this is the big picture long term. And this is a lot of little icons that show different ways that those two things can lead to impacts on southern resident orcas. So the bottom graph shows that our population is expected in Washington to keep going up and up and up. And as the population grows up, that means there's more cars, there's more buildings, which maybe means taking out more salmon habitat. If there's less trees near streams, the water can get hotter, and that means salmon maybe won't survive. There's more boats, there's more goods coming into Puget Sound in those big container ships, which also means we have a higher risk of oil spills. And we have a plan for oil spills where if there would be an oil spill, there's a bunch of boats that will go out and they actually bang a pipe underwater to scare the southern residents so they don't swim into the oil. But we really hope we don't ever have to use that plan, because we don't want oil spills in Puget Sound. But there's a risk, especially as we have more people and more boats. More traffic means more potential chemicals and that stormwater pollution runoff into the water. And I put a toilet here because it also means a lot more people using the toilet, and a lot of the nutrients in our waste can end up in the water and impact salmon and impact orcas. So we care about these things for all those reasons. And it's not hopeless, because we know that there are impacts, we can do it smarter. We can think about how to develop in ways, or protect streams, or reduce chemicals in ways that even as our population grows, we can try to make it work and try to make it less of an impact on salmon and orcas. And we can work to try to reduce climate change. I know that's kind of a we're all in it together, big global issue, but there are things we can do to try to work on that as well. So the good news is because we all love orcas and we all care about the southern residents, our governor Inslee made a task force a couple years ago. There are all these important people who are experts on orca and all different parts of the environment, and they came together and they talked about what we can do, and they came up with 49 different ways that we could help southern resident killer whales. And there's a whole report that's online that you could look at. It talks about a lot of the things we've just been talking about, to increase the amount of salmon, to improve the habitat for salmon, to reduce boat noise and disturbance, to decrease the impacts of stormwater and contaminants and chemicals, and to offset the impacts of population growth. All of those recommendations are there, and we've been working really hard on them. But you can do things too. So there's the big picture, like the policy, and the government has to do their part, but also individual people and even kids can do their part too. So a couple of the things you can do are to skip the selfie and be whale wise. So I can show you another video if we have time at the end that talks about be whale wise. But what we ask people to do is, if you go out on a boat, to give the orca whales lots of space. So the rules allow you to get up to 300 yards on either side. But we ask people maybe consider viewing them from shore instead. You don't need to have a picture of an orca to know that they're out there, and you might be doing your part to help them live and survive and catch the salmon that they otherwise might not have been able to catch. You can also report if you ever see an orca to that whale report app. And that can help us inform those ferries and the big container ships that orcas may be nearby so that they can slow down and reduce their noise. You can volunteer to restore salmon habitat, and you can help to keep our water clean and healthy by reducing dangerous chemicals that you use, by cleaning up pet waste. All of those types of things make a difference to help our water stay healthy. You can even do something like plant a tree. And that can help with salmon habitat, and it can help make our water cleaner and cooler, which is what the salmon want. So that is my last slide, and I will stop there and invite Leah back. And I'm excited to answer any questions that you have.
Julie, that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. I've learned so much about orcas today. Our first question comes from McLean Elementary School, and they want to know, why are orcas black and white?
That is a wonderful, wonderful question. And I don't think I know the answer. I think that I like to think of it kind of like they're pandas that live in the sea. And other dolphins are not black and white, but orcas are special. And I think that's a wonderful question, and I'm happy to look into that more for you.
I've heard that it has something to do with their camouflage. So they protect them from predators above because they're so dark, and then from below, the predators they see the white. So it helps them find prey and avoid predators. But I don't know, I guess it's a follow-up question. Are there other animals that would be eating an orca for dinner?
Oh, that is a good question. I think that people are definitely the biggest risk to orcas, and we typically do not eat them. So that's good, at least. They are at the top of the food chain. So like people, we don't have to worry about dinosaurs coming for us very often. And the orcas only have to worry about the world being hard. They don't have to worry about somebody hunting them.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm curious, where do orcas go in the winter?
That is a great question. So we know that the orcas like to go and spend some time on the coast, but something I really like is that we don't know their every movement. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's good that we leave them alone sometimes and we don't have boats following them, because we do a lot of science, and there's a researcher out there who will collect their poop as soon as they poop, and they use a poop sniffing dog, and they pick it up and then they study it, and that helps us learn what the orcas eat so we can work on helping them get their food that they need. But I think it's sometimes good that they're they're left alone. And so when they go out on the coast, we don't know everywhere they go, but we hope that they're finding food out there, and we know that they come back. And we're always really happy and excited when they come back to Puget Sound to visit us.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm wondering, can I still eat salmon?
For sure. Yes, that's a great question. So we make sure at the Department of Fish and Wildlife that the salmon that are caught in a way that's sustainable. We've done some research also to study and make sure that we're not taking so much salmon that the orcas aren't getting the salmon that we're catching. And something you should know is that a lot of times the salmon that we get here in the Northwest are caught after they've gone by the orcas. So they're already a little further in the estuary or close to where they're headed. We're not catching them right as the orca is about to eat them. So we're trying to be really careful on that, but we are also watching to make sure if we think there are not going to be enough salmon out there, we might step back and fish a little less. But that's so that you know, if you like to eat salmon, that whenever you buy salmon, it was caught because we're paying really close attention and we think it's okay.
Great, thank you. Do pods from matriarchs ever combine?
Yeah, so the pods, remember, so there's J pod, K pod, and L pod, and those are the bigger groups of like 30 orcas. They sometimes come together in what's called a super pod, and that's like a big orca party when they all get together, and that might be when they socialize with one another. But each of the pods even has kind of their own way of talking. Like, you know, if you're from a different part of the country, you maybe have your own accent. Somebody from the South sounds a little different than somebody from New York, sounds a little different from somebody here. And the orcas are a little different too, but they can intermingle and they might even combine. So like maybe a male from one group and a female from another group will have a baby. But the mothers and those matriarchal groups is how we keep track of the families.
Wonderful, thank you. And how big is an orca baby at birth?
That's a great question too. They are, I don't have a weight. Oh, I think that they're around 7 to 8 feet long. And they might be around 300 to 400 pounds. So it's kind of like a gorilla. So if you have a baby and it looks like it's like a full grown gorilla.
Holy cow, that is a big baby. Another question, should I not go on whale watching tours? How would that affect the economy?
That is another really good question. So one of the things that's part of my job is to work with the commercial whale watching industry to make sure that they're viewing southern resident orcas only in a way that's sustainable. So we want to reduce the amount of boats near orcas, give them more time to find food. The good thing though, is that we have tons of whales in Puget Sound. We have humpback whales, those are really cool. We have those transient killer whales if you want to see an orca. We have minke whales, we have gray whales, there's seals and sea lions to see. So if you go on a whale tour, there are lots of different things that you can go and see, even if you don't end up seeing southern resident killer whales. And if you don't see a southern resident killer whale, you can be really happy that you know that the whale watching tour was doing its part to help out and giving those whales a break. But when they do view them, sometimes it's at a level that we think is okay and safe. So we're paying close attention to that and studying to make sure. But I think at the moment, there's still plenty of good reasons to go on a whale watching tour if that's something that would be fun for you and your family.
Awesome, that would be really neat. And I would love to see a minke whale and most of the animals you just mentioned. So that's wonderful to know that it's a good experience. I'm just curious, our last question, and then if we can watch your video if you'd like. How do orcas impact me and my daily life?
That is a great question for you to think about after this call. I know a lot of us love animals. That might be why you're even listening to this call, because you love animals or you love the ocean. And I know I always really like to watch nature documentaries and when you get to see these beautiful creatures that live out there and they're so interesting and mysterious. And to me, that makes me really happy that they're out there. Now, we don't eat orcas, like I said, we don't benefit from them. I guess our economy benefits when people go on whale tours, but really for me, a lot of it is that it's an important part of our culture. If you live in the Northwest, and especially in Washington State, if you drive around, look and see how many orcas you see just in signs or in a mural on the side of a building, or it's in the name of a business. People care deeply, and it's a part of our sense of place and where we live. When we think of Puget Sound and we think of Washington, we think of orcas, and that makes us happy to know that they're out there. So part of why we want to save them is because we want to know that they're out there, because they're a part of us and who we are. And they're really important to the tribes as well. A lot of the Northwest tribes think of the orca as people and as members of their own family. And so we want to care about them because our neighbors and the tribes care about them. And we want them to exist for future generations too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. And I think we'll close out with watching the video you mentioned.
Sounds good. I will get that pulled up.
And if anyone else has any questions that you did not hear or maybe I didn't see, you can email me and I will pop that in the chat again. And I just want to thank everyone so much for coming today.
All right, here we go.
When my wife and I were coming up from Olympia to Seattle in our boat, we were approaching the Tacoma Narrows, and off in the distance we saw a pod of orcas that were paralleling our track. And so we were watching them as the sun was going down, and we were going underneath the Tacoma Narrows, and it was just a beautiful, iconic Pacific Northwest evening. You might see in some book someplace.
Orcas are majestic. They're the animal kingdom equivalent of Mount Rainier.
The southern residents are so important to the Pacific Northwest because not only are they a really symbolic animal to this region, but they're also a really big part of the natural environment here. And when you consider that, you can really consider that taking care of them is taking care of our own home.
They're our top mammal on the marine side, and so they'd give us a good idea of what's going on out in that marine environment. If orcas are hurting, there's something going on that's going to hurt the rest of the system, including humans.
The Lummi consider the orcas our relatives that live under the water. We regard them as our relatives, and we also know that what happens to the orcas happens to our people.
The southern resident killer whales, also known as orcas, are a population here in the Pacific Northwest, and they're listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act.
The southern resident orca population is not doing very well. Their population stands at just 75 individuals, and we were lucky to celebrate the births of 3 calves over the last couple of years, but that's not enough, and the lives of those babies are still precarious.
They're long-lived creatures, so they're not all in the breeding age. We only find about 1/3 of the whales are breeding at any given time, and we're not having high survival of those that do breed.
There are 3 factors affecting orca survival. The first and probably most important is the lack of food for them, the Chinook salmon that is their preferred prey. The second is toxic chemicals in their blood, and the third is noise and interference from boats.
It's vitally important that we do our part to save the orcas. If they go extinct on our watch, then that's the guilt that we're going to have to live with and that we passed on to our future generations.
These are who we are. If we lose the orca, we've lost part of ourselves.
Recreational boaters and southern residents can coexist together safely by doing a few things.
Having a clear definition of what the orcas need is really important. And right now the whale-wise is the nice way to do it. And if we don't follow the whale-wise rules, there's going to be heavier rules coming.
Being whale-wise is really critical to orca recovery because it provides boaters with kind of an outline on how to protect these animals.
Within a half nautical mile of these animals, It's a 7-knot speed limit. Anything over that is a violation of the rules. Secondly, it's a distance or a spacing protective bubble that we've placed around these animals. Anytime there's a southern resident killer whale in the vicinity, you're not allowed to approach within 300 yards to the sides and with 400 yards from the front and back of an orca or a group of orcas. That is to give it a little more space, to give that animal an opportunity to feed and to take care of its young.
Following Be Whale-wise practices is important because orcas use their own form of sonar called echolocation to find their food. And they're hunting in the deep, dark depths of Puget Sound, and they need to use sonar to find fish. And too much noise from boats interferes with their ability to hear and hunt and catch food and feed their young.
They need to have that uninterrupted sound environment so they can hear and find those salmon. And if we interfere with that, even if the fish are there, they got to find them too.
If you're in an area within a half mile, say, of a group of orcas or a single orca, to turn off your sounder, because those sounders can run at a frequency that can sometimes interfere with their own sonar that they use to find their prey. If you emulate great behavior, others will follow.
They can
Thanks again, Julie. It was so lovely to have you. I just wanted to let everyone know before we completely sign off, our next Wild Washington Live event is December 14th at 11 a.m. And it's called Getting Crabby, Careers with European Green Crabs. So if you're interested in learning a little bit about our Aquatic Invasive Species Department and what working with European green crabs may look like, you can find that on our Facebook or over on our calendar on our website. And thank you everyone so much for joining. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and have a great holiday.